The meeting is now being recorded. And as I said, I'm Caitlin. This webinar is about creating a resume for a job application. And I am a fellow MTA member. I work at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I'm a student development and career mentoring specialist. That's my long title. I'm an advisor in the Honors College. And I'm also in a PhD program at UMass Boston in education. I focus on international education. And I'm a longtime Mass resident. So I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts. I lived for many years, for about 5 years, in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia. And I moved back here about a year and a half ago. And when I was in Colombia, in Bogota, I was advising students as well as people who were applying to jobs in the US. I had a small advising business there. And so the MTA invited me to share some of this knowledge and some of the resources with you all today. And I hope that they can be useful for you. And so for the first part of the session, we're just going to do a couple of polls so we can get to know each other a little bit, have like a little bit of interaction in this new online learning space that we're in. So you can go to the chat, and you do need to copy and paste the link into a new tab, yes. So if you can go into the chat, copy and paste, it's the pollev.com, put it into a new window, and it's going to take you to a poll. And I see some people have already found it. So the question is, in one word, how would you describe how you're feeling today? So go ahead, open up that chat, and then I'm going to share my screen with you, and you can see everyone's responses. It kind of populates this, they call it a word cloud. So go ahead, this will just kind of be the introduction question so you can kind of see how this poll everywhere works. And then there's a few other questions for you all. So I just give you another about 30 seconds if you want to write any word or phrase to describe how you're feeling today. And you all can see the screen? I'm not sure that you could. You all can see the word cloud though. Okay, so you can see good, anxious, great, exhausted. I think that I can relate with some of those feelings also. We're going through a lot as a country and in our individual lives. So, you know, thanks for being here and for paying attention. So I'm gonna move on. We're gonna use the same exact poll link. And I want to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm interested to know what your current role is at your school. So if you just refresh that same exact link, you're going to see a new question. What is your current role at your institution, at your school? So you can just type in there and it's going to populate the word cloud again. And we can see that we have, probably it does like separate the words if you wrote 2 words. So probably like physical education, paraprofessional, health, working in several different areas, teacher. Great. And I'm going to go to move into the resume portion of this webinar. So I'm interested to know, How confident do you feel about your ability to create or improve your resume? So on the left, the red sad face is, I'm really lost. I don't know where to start. Green is, awesome. I don't even know why I'm here on this webinar. And so you can see what your colleagues, how they feel. Looks like we're kind of like middle to right side. So perfect. Hopefully we can give you some good tips today. So I'm going to move back to the PowerPoint. Thanks for sharing a little bit about yourselves. And I have an introduction question for you. So how long do you think that employers typically spend reading your resume? So do you think it is 6 seconds, 30 seconds, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes? If you refresh your poll, you can see that I have a new question there and you can give your answer. Okay, so we have about 75% of the people think 30 seconds, 20% think 5 minutes, 20% think 6 seconds. Here's the results of the poll. Oh, someone changed their mind. No, the person who changed your mind, you were right. So I'm gonna move back. So I'm gonna move and show you my PowerPoint again. So this is according to one study by the Ladders. It's an online job search site that found that employers typically spend about 6 seconds reading your resume. Now there's different studies that might show different results, but the point here is that employers are not spending a long time. They're really scanning your resume, and that's why you need to make sure that you can really stand out through your resume. So the goal today is that you will be able to identify the essential resume writing points and resources needed to create a dynamic and clean resume that will make you stand out as an excellent job applicant. And so what we'll look at today is what is the purpose of the resume for employers, 5 essential resume writing points, what not to include, so 5 common mistakes, the importance of revision, and then we'll review the resources that were sent to you, I believe, yesterday for revising or perhaps creating your own resume. So there were 3 resources sent yesterday. It was a template, an action word chart, and a revision checklist. If you want to bring those up, I will be referencing them. So if you want to pull them up and have them handy, that would be useful, though it's not 100% necessary. You'll still be able to follow along. So what is the purpose of the resume for employers? This is not going to be a poll. You're just going to think about it in your head. Do you think that the purpose of the resume for employers is A, to determine if they want to hire you, B, to decide if they will interview you, C, to understand your relevant professional skills and experiences in a clear and concise way, or D, to determine if you are lying about your experiences? So you can choose more than one answer. If you have a piece of paper, maybe write down the letter or think about it in your head. And so both B and C are really important for employers. So they're trying to decide when they look at your resume if they're going to interview you, and they want to be able to understand your relevant professional skills and experiences in a clear and concise way. So a tip that I have for creating your resume or revising your resume is to remember RCC. So you want that employers can understand your relevant professional skills and experiences in a clear and concise way. Another important tip is that longer is not necessarily more impressive, and the quality of the content is much more important than the length. I put a quote here from Steve Jobs that illustrates this. Quality is more important than quantity. 1 home run is much better than 2 doubles. So some questions that employers are asking themselves when they review your resume, they're asking, can you do the job? So they're trying to determine if you're qualified. Can you do the job well? So they want to determine if you will add value to the team. And can you do the job better than other applicants? So you need to think about what makes you stand out. So your resume is really a way for you to show employers that you're qualified, that you will add value to the team, and that you stand out from other job applicants. So to help you do this, I have 5 tips that we'll run through. They are length, layout, bold sections on your resume, word choice, and then grammar, capitalization, and punctuation. So first, with the length, what you want to remember is that RCC, the relevant, clear, and concise. I always tell people I recommend resumes to be between 1 and 3 pages. For recent grads, I'm working with a lot of recent grads in my job, 1 page is usually sufficient. If you have several years of work experience, which many of you on this call do, I recommend between 1.5 to 3 pages. If you're going to go over onto a second page, you want to make sure that it's 1.5 pages and not just 1 page and like a few lines on the next page. The layout, so the key here is that it's easy for employers to quickly scan your resume and decide if you stand out as qualified and someone who would add value to the organization. So you want to make sure that there's white space, that you use single spacing, that there's like a margin around the edge, basically that it's easy to scan. So I did send you a template. So that is a template that I use. There are many, many different templates online that you could look for and might suit you better. But the main thing is that you want your resume to be easy to read. So then at the top of the resume, you're always going to have your personal information, which should be your name, address, cell phone, and your email. Make sure that your email is a professional one. And by professional, I don't mean it has to be at the current organization that you're at. It can be a personal email, but it should be something like your name and not poppynumber1fan@gmail.com, for example. Okay, in terms of the different sections on your resume, you want to make sure that the key is that it's easy for employers to quickly scan your resume and to understand your experiences. So on the template, there will be some sections that you use and then some sections that you omit because you just don't use those sections. However, all resumes will have the education and certification section, professional experience, and then skills and interests. So with the education and certifications, you want to start with your most recent degree, and then the name and location of the university or the institution, the year of graduation, and you can list relevant coursework. I would say that the case that I recommend doing this in is if you don't have practical experience in the job area that you're applying in, but you do have some sort of coursework or certificate experience, even if it is online coursework, not formal university coursework, you could list it there. Otherwise, I don't recommend listing the coursework. Professional experience. So in this section, again, you're going to start with your most recent experience, your job title and company, location, start and end date, and then I recommend 3 to 8 bullets per position. A key here is to use numbers, so like people and data when you can. So these are 2 examples. Built one-on-one trusting relationships with 20 students over 5 years. Increased sales by 20% in 1 year, if you had a past life in sales and then moved to education. Skills and interests. So this is the last section if you're looking at the template. And here you can list languages, you can list technical skills. So like technical skills could be Word, Photoshop, Java, things like that. I don't recommend listing soft skills like communication or time management here. Those skills could come through in the cover letter. We're just covering the resume today, not the cover letter, but that's where those skills could come through. And then the other part of the bottom section of skills and interests is the interests. And I really do encourage you to include these. Some people think, well, is that really necessary? Is it kind of silly? But I used to review a lot of resumes in the educational nonprofit that I worked in Boston before I moved to Columbia. And I would say that this was something that it made people more rememberable for us. It made people seem like a real person rather than just a piece of paper. And so, I mean, examples are karate, cooking, knitting, whatever it might be for you. And then the other bold sections that you might include are volunteer experience, leadership experience, professional organizations, awards, professional presentations, and publications. Not everyone will have each of these sections, and you might think of a section that you yourself want to add. I saw in the registration, someone was asking about how to list participation in committees. So if you serve on a lot of committees, maybe you want to make that a separate section on your resume also. And in these separate sections, you want to use the same formatting that you use under the professional experience section so that it's easy for employers to scan and understand your resume. And I recommend to focus on your most relevant experiences. Word choice. So you want to make sure that you stand out as someone who's qualified and would add value to the organization. So you want to start each bullet point with an action word, a verb. And you want to use strong and unique action words. So for example, instead of led, you could use the word spearheaded. And you want to use a variety of action words. So you don't want to use in every bullet, manage, 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 for example. You want to change them up. And so I did give you all a resource. It's called Dynamic Action Word Chart. It's actually something that I created for myself at one point when I was doing a lot of resume reviews. And so it's broken up into different skills, management skills for like projects and events and systems, then leadership skills for working with people, communication skills, and then ways to say that you improved or increased something. So that can be a useful chart for you when you're trying to look for these like varied words to not repeat yourself. Then in terms of industry specific keywords, so some employers use these to search resume databases. So if you think that you're going to be applying for jobs that do use this, you want to look at certain nouns or phrases in the job descriptions that are repeated often. They'll be kind of obvious to you. You'll kind of get to know them. And then, you know, just include some of those in your resume. So grammar, capitalization, and punctuation. The important thing here is that you display your writing ability and attention to detail. It might seem silly, but I see lots of small grammar and other errors in resumes from people who are, you know, very, very educated. And, you know, it takes away from showcasing their abilities. So grammar, your current position is always in the present tense. And then all of your past positions are always in the past tense. Capitalization, you know, make sure to capitalize the first letter bullet of the sentence, and only the proper nouns are capitalized. Punctuation, I recommend just putting a period at the end of every bullet or sentence and just be consistent with that. Another way that you can kind of separate out lists of several items that you want to stand out is like use a colon, like the example below, liaised with partners such as Boston's mayor's office, Northeastern University, Boys and Girls Club. Can make it a little bit easier to read. Yeah, so those are the 5 areas of tips, and then a couple of mistakes that you want to avoid. So a fancy layout. So the only exception to this that I have seen when people try to do a fancy layout with like graphics and borders and underlined text or colored text, the only time that I've seen this work is when the people are graphic designers. and they did a really good job with it and they had those skills. Otherwise, if you don't have those skills, I would say to keep it simple and think in your head clear. Personal information, so don't include things like photo, date of birth, gender, marital status, ethnicity, religion. Employers are not supposed to ask for those items. Acronyms, so you want to write out the complete name. So for example, ASL, write out American Sign Language, or if you work in ESL, write out English as a second language. Just think, will someone who is not from my school or my exact field understand this? Sometimes when we become so accustomed to different acronyms, they actually become words in our own head, but they mean nothing to other people. So just be aware of that. You don't need to include references unless it's specifically asked for, then of course include it. And then pronouns, so don't use I in your resume. The importance of revision. So small errors tell the employer that you're not serious and that you don't pay attention to detail. So it's super important to revise. Self-revise a couple of times, ask a friend or colleague to revise. And to help you with this is the resume checklist that I sent out. So basically the resume checklist takes these different points that we talked about today and puts it into a checklist so you can look through your resume and make sure that you have all of the major points. And yeah, I think asking a friend or colleague to revise is really important. Okay, so those are my main tips and key points for you today. I have a little check for understanding. It's not public, it's not a poll, just think in your head. Homer is thinking with you. What is the purpose of the resume for employers? 3 key words. The hint is RCC. So remember, the employers want to understand your relevant professional skills and experiences in a clear and concise way and decide if they will interview you. Then if you think back to one of the first slides, what are some questions employers ask themselves when they read or actually scan very quickly your resume? 3 key questions. So can you do the job? Can you do the job well? And can you do the job better than other applicants? So you want to make sure that you stand out as qualified, as someone who would add value, and as someone who stands out in the applicant pool. Okay, so now it's your turn to review your own resume using the resume checklist and the dynamic action word chart, or to create a resume using the resume template. And that is really your homework, and you have the resources to be able to do that. And with that, I'm going to do one more poll before we move on to questions. So I want to know, after this presentation, how confident do you feel about your ability to create or improve your resume? If you refresh your chat link, I can see some of you are doing that. Just let me know, how do you feel after the presentation? And I can share this with you all. So on the green, in the green zone now, so great to hear. Okay, and so thanks so much for your attention. I am going to take any questions that you might have. Let me open up the chat box and take questions. Okay. So I'm going to read some questions out of the chat box. However, if you prefer to ask a question, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and speak also. Either way is great. But I will go in to see what has been going on in the chat. Yeah, so the resources are in an email that was sent out with the Zoom link. So if you want to go back to that, you'll see the resources that I showed on the screen. I'm not seeing any other specific questions in the chat. So if you have any specific questions about formatting your own resume or anything that I talked about, feel free to write them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and speak your questions also.
I just have one quick question.
Yeah.
What if your education experience isn't the best? I have more work experience than I do education.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And you know, this template, am I still screen sharing?
Yes.
Yeah, so this template, you know, in that case, I would move your professional experience up as the first portion, and then I would move the education experience below it,
Okay.
just to showcase your professional experience. That would be one suggestion. And I think, you know, for new graduates, the education experience is, you know, of course, going to be a little more weighted. Whereas if you've been working for many, many years, I think your professional experience at some point starts to, you know, be more important. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to follow up with another question with that along that same line.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, my name is Christine.
Hi.
I had worked in the financial services industry for almost 18 years before I moved into the academic area. So in my resume right now is like 3 pages long, but after looking at your template, I can see ways that I can cut it down a little bit. So my most relevant information is the school, working in the school right now. If I were to go back and apply for a job in financial industry or, you know, something out of academics, so it's okay to move your professional experience up even though that's not your current position, or should you always start with your current position?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good point. So there are other ways that you could organize this. Like, you want to make sure that you're consistent in however you organize it. But for example, if you wanted to do 2 professional experience and do professional experience financial industry, and then start with your most recent, and then do professional experience education under it, and then start with your most recent experience. I mean, the most important thing is that, like, it makes sense and it's easy to read.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and also if you are like looking to change industries, you will see, you could Google this. Some people will put a little thing at the top that's like a professional summary. It's kind of like similar to what some people put in their LinkedIn profiles. So you could Google that a little bit. If people are like looking to make a big industry switch, I think that can be helpful because you can kind of like try to succinctly make sense of your past experiences. So you could include something like that. Like, people used to include these like objectives at the top of the resume. That's kind of out of style now. And some people do these like summaries. And I only recommend that if people are like changing industries and are like trying to explain that. So you could Google a little bit for that.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I do see another question in the chat. How will you write your resume to get a teaching job if you have been working as a para? So actually, I don't know if that question is more about like certifications in the teaching world. I mean, I would definitely highlight the skills that you have in working with students and working in the classroom, working with principals, some of those skills that you are going to need as a teacher that you already have. I would just make sure to highlight those for sure. Yeah. And then another question. I've heard of putting your teaching philosophy or career objective on a resume. Do you recommend that? Yeah. So the career objective is something that used to be pretty popular with resumes and is kind of not the fad right now. I mean, it's not wrong to do if you want to include it. Your teaching philosophy, I mean, could be nice. I actually haven't seen that, but I think that could be a nice touch to put up at the top of a resume. And there's not like one right or wrong way to do a resume. These are my tips. And you might want to look at, Google some other teaching resumes and kind of see what works best for you.
Could I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. On the sample that you gave, you have listed volunteer experience. Is that any type of volunteer experience, whether it's in a school or at a church or anything like that? Or are they looking for like professional, like volunteer experience?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, I mean, for volunteer experience and some of those other like optional pieces, what I would say is the most important ones to list would be those that you have like transferable skills in. So if you're, applying for a job in a school and you have volunteer experience working with, with youth in another context, I think that that's very useful to list. So yes, I think that the most relevant and that have transferable skills are the ones that you want to list. But I mean, you could list something that also, if you've been committed to a volunteer experience for, the past 10 years, that I mean, I would list that if it's like a big part of your life, because it just shows kind of another aspect and commitment to your resume.
Okay, thank you.
I can scroll down. Someone's asking to scroll. And so you're going to delete some of these that don't apply to you. You might add other ones. This was the section that I was talking about, skills and interests. Great. Well, thank you so much for your questions. I'm going to stay on if people have other questions. And if not, I hope that the resources are useful to you. If you're, looking to improve your resume and looking at different career options, I wish you the best of luck. And thanks for attending today. And I will stay on if there's other questions.